Hello there everyone, this is Brother Birch. In this video I'm going to be introducing how to get started, or at least one way to get started, on assignment 2.5. Okay. Notice here that it says note that this is probably the most difficult assignment of the semester. Of course, this will also get you very far along on the project as well. Please allocate a couple hours for this assignment. Okay, so this is a pretty cool program because it says write a function display table to display a calendar on the screen. The function will take two parameters: num days, the number of days in the month, and offset, the offset from Monday. If the offset is 0, then the month starts on Monday. If the offset's 2, it starts on Wednesday. If it's 6, it starts on Sunday, and so forth. So we're going to do this. If I was just going to think this out, okay, I'd have to have a console output and an input for the number of days. Same thing with offset, and then I'd pass these into a function called display table. All right, display table will have to display this beautiful header for me, which should be pretty easy. Just count up the spaces. And then it gets a little bit tricky in here. All right, if I was going to have to think through this, I would want to count up the number of spaces here. Okay, assuming that there is, assuming that there's no tab right here, and it's just O and F to the left of SU. Okay, so there'd be two spaces here, and then each column has two spaces, takes up the length of two spaces as well. Okay, so if I looked at this, from U to O, that'd be 4 characters. Okay, in this case it's two spaces and then MO, and so each column has 4 spaces. All right, if I know the offset, okay, let's say the offset is 6. All right, then all I would have to do is print that, and then I would start a loop. Okay, and I might add 2 spaces there before or during the loop. Okay, and then have my first 1 get placed there. Okay, and then I'd have 2 spaces, and then put my 2 there on Monday, and then 2 spaces, and then 3, and then 2 spaces, then 4, then 2 spaces, then 5, then 6, and then 7. And then anytime I'll want to be tracking, how often this is happening. So every time I hit the end of a row, okay, depending on what my offset is, if my offset was 6, I'm going to loop through 7 times before I need a new row. But if my offset was like 5, then we'd start on Saturday, and so I'd have to take that into account. Okay, but basically just keeping track of how many times I'm going to loop before I need a new row, because then as once I know that, I'll just keep on looping until I hit the number of months or the number of days in the month, and then I'm done. Okay, so it says num days will be the number of days in the month. Offset is the offset from Monday. The function will be very similar to display table in project 2. Okay, and you're going to use that in project 2 because project 2 is you're displaying a calendar, okay, of any given month, of any given year since like 1753 or something like that. But the mechanics of this will be very, very similar, just like it says here. Okay, so let's take a quick look at how we might get started. I pulled this up. This is just a little bit earlier. This is on page 186 in your book, of a loop. Okay, so if I had a loop here, I might say, while I might do like a for loop. Let me find a for loop real quick. There we go. So this is on page 183. It says for int count equals 1, while count is less than or equal to n, increment count by 1. All right. So I might do something very similar to this, but with the days of the month. I'd want to compute my offset and make sure that that's good to go. And then I would start off my table with the table header, and maybe starting with like the first value in the table or something like that, and then I would start looping through it while I is less than or equal to the number of days in the month. Okay, and then inside of this loop, I would have to check for a couple things. Okay, I would add the spaces and then okay, for each column that comes up. All right, and then and you might want to look back on how to use set width for that. That might be really helpful to kind of do both those things together, adding the spaces and the day of the month for that. But then, like I said earlier, you'd have to have some logic to be able to start a new row. So one thing, if I was going to get started on this, I would go ahead and copy your template over. All right, and then once you're in there, maybe write out a little bit of pseudocode. Okay, and what I mean by that, you guys should all be pros with this by now. But just throw in some comments. Be like, oh, right here, I'm gonna prompt for days in month, and then I'll prompt for the offset. Okay, where I really think you should have comments is in your function display table. Okay, and we know that will take days and int offset. Okay, having comments here will be extremely helpful in helping you kind of work through this. Okay, if I was going to work through it the same way that we kind of talked about, I'd say, oh yeah, I need to display the header of the table. Okay, and then I'm going to have to start, I might have something to store the location of where I'm at in printing this table. There's a lot of different ways that you could do this, and so I don't want to go into too much detail about how you might do this, but one method would be if I had a string table, and I could just start this off as just an empty string. I know I'm going to have 2 spaces, well actually 3 spaces, because the first day of the month is always going to be 1. So even if my offset was 6 and my first day of the month was on a Sunday, I would start off with this string table with 3 here, and then I'd add the number 1 for that first display. But I'll actually just leave that like this for now. Okay, so I might declare a string table. All right, and then when I'm a little bit later, when I'm looping through, I can just say table or string dot append, and then you can append whatever you want. So this will just basically add to this string. And so I could say, if I had a variable I could append I to it, or if I needed to append a space to it and then whatever you want. But this would just like add to that string, and then you could, just print that. But that's one way you might want to think about it, and there's a lot of other ways as well. But anyways, this is kind of how I would get started with the assignment. If you have any questions, just let me know, and really look for those examples in the book, because those will be really helpful for you.